Rain hammered the roof like it was trying to break through, and the clock on the wall glowed 2:30 a.m. I remember standing there, frozen, the smell of wet earth creeping through the cracks, my heart pounding louder than the storm outside. Then came the knocking, desperate, uneven, like someone fighting time itself. For a moment, I thought it was a dream, until I saw the small shadow trembling on my porch. If you've ever opened your door to something you didn't understand and felt your whole world shift in a single breath, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. That night, I wasn't just answering a knock. I was opening the door to everything I thought I'd lost. Let me show you how it all began. It was 2:30 a.m. when the pounding began. At first, I thought it was the wind again, the kind that shook the shutters and rattled the glass just to remind me how alone I really was. But this wasn't the wind. This was desperate, heavy, human. I sat there for a moment, frozen in my chair, listening to the rain hammering the roof and the thunder cracking across the hills. My heart felt like it was trying to match that rhythm. Living alone in this old house, you learn to ignore certain noises, but this one wouldn't let me. I reached for the flashlight, my fingers trembling, every step toward the door feeling louder than the storm itself. The knocking stopped, then came again, softer this time, weaker. When I finally pulled open the door, the light flickered across a small boy standing there, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to his forehead. He couldn't have been more than 8. He looked up at me with those wide, familiar eyes, the kind I hadn't seen in years, and when he spoke his name, it hit me like lightning. The same name as my son. The son I buried 20 years ago. For a moment, the storm outside and the storm inside me became one. I didn't know who he was or why he was here, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever I opened that night wasn't just a door, it was my past. Come knocking. Most mornings start the same. I wake before the sun, out of habit more than need, and sit by the window with my coffee. The air is still. The only sound is the clock ticking in the kitchen, the same one that's been there since Danny was little. I used to hate that sound. Now it's company. The days stretch out in quiet patterns, crossword puzzles, watering the same 3 plants, watching the mail truck stop at every house but mine. It's a simple life, I suppose, but not the kind that fills you. Just one that keeps you breathing. Sometimes I catch myself setting 2 plates at the table. One for me, one for no one. The habit never really went away. Even after all these years, I still expect to hear Danny's footsteps or the sound of his laugh bouncing down the hallway. Instead, I hear only the hum of the refrigerator and the creak of old floors under my slippers. We hadn't spoken since the fight. I can still see his face that day. The anger, the hurt, the way he walked out without looking back. I told myself he'd call. That pride was just part of being young. But pride has no age. Mine kept me from dialing his number, from saying I was sorry. Now, silence fills every corner of this house. It's the kind of quiet that presses on your chest until you forget what warmth feels like. I keep busy to avoid remembering, but the memories find their way in. They always do. That night, when I heard the knock, I didn't know it yet, but my quiet little world was about to shatter. The storm that night felt heavier than any I could remember. The rain didn't fall. It attacked, slashing sideways against the windows. I had just turned off the lamp when the knocking came again. Sharp, urgent, too human to ignore. My heart stuttered. It had been years since anyone had come to my door after dark. I stood there for what felt like forever. The old floorboards creaking beneath my feet. The sound of my own breathing louder than the thunder outside. Something deep inside me whispered to stay still, but something else, older and quieter, told me to move. When I finally opened the door, the cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth and something faintly metallic, like fear itself. A small boy stood there, drenched to the bone, hair clinging to his forehead, eyes too big for his face. He looked like a ghost left out in the rain. He wouldn't step inside at first. His hands shook. His lips trembled. I could see the dirt under his fingernails and the way he flinched every time thunder cracked. I told myself to be cautious, but all I saw was a child, lost, terrified, and alone. He muttered that his parents were gone, just gone. The words hit me like a chill down my spine. I wanted to ask more, but his eyes, they reminded me of Danny's when he was little. That same way of looking at the world, like it might disappear if he blinked. Then, almost like an afterthought, he said his name, Ethan Walker. The sound of it froze me. Walker. My name. My son's name. In that single breath, I felt time split in two, before that knock, and after. Everything I thought was buried had just found its way back to my door. The morning after Ethan came, I found his backpack by the door, soaked through, dirt clinging to the seams. Inside were scraps of a life that didn't belong to a child, old newspaper clippings, a rusted key, and a photo so worn I almost didn't recognize the face. But I did. Danny. My Danny. Standing beside a man I remembered from town. Vincent Russo. The name twisted something in me, something I hadn't let myself feel in years. For days. I turned those things over in my hands. I listened to Ethan talk in broken pieces, half whispers and dreams. He said Danny used to meet people in parking lots, always looking over his shoulder. He said he wasn't bad, he was scared. The words tore through me. I had spent years believing my son was a failure, a runaway, a disappointment I couldn't face. But now the truth was unspooling right in front of me. I started remembering things differently. The last fight. His anger wasn't rebellion. It was desperation. I had told him to stop chasing trouble, to think about himself for once. He told me I didn't understand, and he was right. I didn't. Ethan showed me a folder Danny had hidden. Articles about Russo's trucking company, lists of names, ledgers. It all pointed to something darker. Trafficking, bribery, disappearances. Danny wasn't running from the law. He was running from them. From the people he tried to expose. And all this time, while I sat here blaming him, he was trying to keep me safe. When I realized that, the air went out of the room. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, to take back every word I'd thrown at him that day. Every silent night, I chose not to forgive. He didn't leave because he stopped loving me. He left because he still did. I sat there on the floor, Ethan asleep beside me, the rain still whispering against the windows. I looked at Danny's picture one more time and felt something shift inside me. Guilt. Yes, but something else too. A kind of peace. All this time, I thought he'd left me, but he was saving me. And now, it's my turn to finish what he started. For days, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was holding its breath. Every creak in the wood, every flicker of shadow felt like something waiting to be found. I started going through Danny's old things, boxes I'd hidden in the attic years ago, thinking distance could dull the ache. It never did. Inside one of them, I found letters written in his handwriting, but not to me. They were coded, half in numbers, half in words that made no sense until I saw the pattern. Street names, dates, and tucked beneath them, a small flash drive wrapped in duct tape. My hands trembled as I held it, the same way they used to when I checked his homework, pretending I understood his messy scrawl. When I plugged it into my old computer, the screen filled with names, photos, scanned documents, Vincent Russo, the trucking company, police reports marked confidential. Danny had been gathering proof, piece by piece, building a case that no one wanted to see. Ethan started remembering things too, bits and pieces that seemed meaningless at first. A diner name, a warehouse near the river, a silver lighter with a scratched-out logo. Every clue fit into the map Danny had left behind. My son hadn't just stumbled into danger. He'd walked straight into it to protect us. The nights grew quieter, but not calmer. I noticed a car parked across the street more than once. The phone would ring and then go silent. I caught glimpses of movement beyond the porch light. Nothing I could prove, but enough to keep me awake. Fear used to stop me. Now, it only reminded me of him. He'd faced worse. And for me, I realized that grief and fear are twins. One keeps you frozen, the other forces you forward. So I sat there at the kitchen table, Danny's flash drive beside my coffee cup, listening to the storm rolling in again. I whispered to myself, if he died for the truth, the least I can do is face it. Then the headlights appeared outside the window. Slow, familiar, waiting. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the shadows weren't just memories anymore. They were coming back. The days after the storm felt slower, softer somehow. The air inside the house carried a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. No more echoes of loneliness bouncing off the walls, just the quiet rhythm of two people trying to learn how to live again. Ethan started following me around the kitchen in the mornings, asking questions about everything. He'd watch me make pancakes, wide-eyed, like it was magic. The smell of butter and maple filled the air, and for the first time in a long while, I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from deep in the chest. He laughed too, spilling batter across the counter, and I didn't even care. The mess felt alive. We began spending afternoons in the garden, pulling weeds and planting seeds that might not even grow. He'd tell me stories he half remembered about his father, about how Danny used to hum while driving, how he'd always stop to help strangers. Each memory hurt, but in a way that healed through Ethan's small gestures, his stubbornness, even the way he tilted his head when he thought. I saw Danny, not the boy I lost, but the man he became. At night, I'd tuck Ethan into the spare room and stand in the doorway a little too long, watching his chest rise and fall. It struck me how love could return in unexpected shapes, not to replace what was lost, but to remind you It was never truly gone. For the first time in years, I didn't feel empty when I turned out the lights. I felt needed, and that feeling, that fragile, beautiful peace, was everything. But peace never lasts long around here. It was one of those rare, quiet evenings that almost felt ordinary. The house smelled like apple pie. Ethan was sprawled on the couch, pretending to read, but really just tracing shapes in the margins of his book. The television hummed softly in the background, casting blue light across the living room. For the first time in months, I felt safe. I even caught myself thinking that maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind us. Then came the sound. A low hum at first, an engine idling somewhere down the street. I ignored it, told myself it was nothing, but it didn't move. 10 minutes passed, then 15. The sound crawled under my skin. I walked to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to see headlights, still, facing the house. I felt that old tension rise again, the kind that starts in the chest and spreads until your hands tremble. I turned off the TV, told Ethan it was late. My voice was calm, but inside, I was back in the nightmare. I checked the locks twice, then a third time. The kitchen door, the back window, the porch light. Everything was fine. Everything should have been fine. But when I walked past the hallway, I noticed the front door. The chain latch was off. I hadn't touched it since morning. Outside, gravel crunched. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I reached for my phone, but the signal was gone. Dead. Ethan called from the other room, asking what was wrong. His voice was the only thing that kept me from falling apart. I told him to stay put. Every instinct I had screamed to protect him, to grab him and run, but run where the storm outside had started again. Rain hammering against the glass. When I turned back toward the window, there was movement, a shadow slipping behind the car. Then another. 2 of them. Watching. I felt the world tilt. All the warmth we'd built, the laughter, the breakfasts, the little moments of peace, shattered like thin glass. I grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him toward the back hallway. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear his questions. We hid in the pantry, listening to the sound of the front gate creaking open. The house groaned under the weight of the wind, and then silence. The kind of silence that makes you afraid to breathe. Minutes passed before I dared to move. When I finally stepped out, the headlights were gone. The car had vanished, leaving only tire marks in the mud. But on the porch, taped to the door, was a folded piece of paper. No words, just a photo. Danny, standing beside Vincent Russo. My knees gave out. Whoever they were, they wanted me to know they were still here, still watching. That night, as the storm raged outside, something inside me hardened. Fear wasn't enough anymore. I'd lost one family to silence. I wouldn't lose another. Tomorrow, I would stop waiting for answers. I would go find them. I spent the next morning at the kitchen table, surrounded by what was left of Danny's world. Papers, flash drives, old receipts, photos yellowed by time. The more I looked, the more I realized none of it was random. He'd left a trail, quiet, deliberate, almost like he knew I'd one day follow it. His notes were meticulous. Addresses, license plates, phone numbers written in shorthand only he would understand. I cross-referenced the names on the drive he'd hidden with those in his handwritten lists. They matched. Vincent Russo wasn't just laundering money through shell trucking companies. He was paying off people who were supposed to stop him. Judges, detectives, local politicians, people I'd once trusted to keep this town safe. The realization hit hard. This wasn't a simple crime. It was a system. One Danny had tried to dismantle alone. I found an envelope tucked behind a framed photo of us, one I hadn't opened in over a decade. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten line. If anything happens to me, follow the money. I plugged it in, heart pounding. A spreadsheet opened. Payments, offshore accounts, names I recognized from church, from the local council, from the very police department that dismissed my missing person report years ago. That's when it clicked. Danny hadn't vanished because he was reckless. He was silenced because he was getting too close. I wanted to scream, to break something, to curse myself for believing every lie told about him. But anger gave me clarity. I started copying everything, labeling folders, backing it all up. If they came for me next, they wouldn't find silence. They'd find evidence. Ethan watched from the doorway, sensing something had shifted in me. He didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer explanations. I just told him to pack a small bag, in case we needed to leave. As dusk settled, I noticed a car parked at the end of the street again. Same one from before. Engine idling, lights off this time. I shut the laptop and drew the blinds. My pulse steady now. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled me. Danny died trying to expose the truth. I wouldn't let his story end in darkness. The web he uncovered wasn't finished tightening. But now, I finally knew which threads to pull. And somewhere out there, I could feel the spiders starting to move. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the clock until dawn, the numbers barely moving. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. But when morning came, I knew what I had to do. The evidence was ready, printed, copied, sent to every contact Danny ever trusted. Journalists, federal agents, a lawyer who owed him a favor. If they came for me now, it wouldn't matter. The truth was already moving faster than they could silence it. By the time I reached the old warehouse on the edge of town, the air smelled like rust and rain. My heart pounded so hard it hurt, but there was no turning back. The door was half open, waiting for me. Inside, the light filtered through broken windows, cutting long shadows across the floor. And there he was, Vincent Russo. Older than I expected, heavier, but his eyes still sharp. For a moment, all I saw was Danny. The years stolen from him, the lies I believed, the nights I hated him for not coming home. My anger felt like fire in my throat, but I didn't let it speak for me. Not this time. I told him what he'd done. Every payment, every name, every crime hidden beneath the surface of this town. I told him about my son, the boy he'd buried in rumors and fear. And when he tried to deny it, I stopped him. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I simply told him it was over. The files were already out. The people he bought were already running. His empire was cracking. And this time, I wouldn't look away. He stepped closer, searching for weakness. But I had none left. Fear had burned away, leaving only purpose. For the first time, I realized I didn't need revenge. I needed peace, and peace doesn't come from blood. It comes from truth. Outside, I heard sirens, faint at first, then growing louder. He must have heard them too. His face went pale, his confidence draining like water through cracked glass. He backed away, muttering something I didn't care to understand. When the police lights flashed against the walls, I walked out into the rain. My legs shook, but my chest felt lighter. I didn't wait to see him taken away. I didn't need to. I thought of Danny, his voice, his laughter, his stubborn faith that good still mattered. I'd spent years drowning in guilt, but in that moment, I felt him beside me, not as a ghost, but as a promise kept. I turned toward the road, the air cold against my skin. Everything hurt, but I was still standing, still breathing, still here. And for the first time since that terrible night, I whispered to myself, "It's over." Almost. The morning after felt unreal. The town was quiet, almost too quiet, like the world had been holding its breath and was only now remembering how to exhale. I sat by the window, coffee in hand, watching sunlight stretch across the fields behind my house. The air smelled of wet earth and spring. For the first time in years, I didn't feel afraid of what was coming next. The investigation had begun. Russo was gone, maybe behind bars, maybe running. It didn't matter. His grip on this place had broken, and the silence he built with fear was finally cracking open. But what mattered most wasn't justice. It was the peace that followed it. The peace I'd thought I'd never earn. Ethan was in the yard, chasing a paper airplane through the wind. His laughter carried through the open window, light and free, and I could almost hear Danny's voice in it. Same rhythm, same warmth. I realized then that love doesn't end where loss begins. It reshapes itself, finds new ways to live. I still miss him every day. That ache hasn't left me, but it's softer now. It reminds me I'm still human, that I still have something left to give. I used to think pain was a punishment. Now I see it's a teacher. It strips you down until all that's left is truth, who you are, and what you're willing to fight for. I'm not the same woman I was when this began. I'm stronger, but not harder. Wiser, but not bitter. And I've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself from the weight of what can't be changed. As I watch Ethan running through the morning light, I whisper a quiet thank you to Danny for his courage, to the truth for finding me, and to life for giving me a second chance to love what's still here. If you've ever faced something that broke you before it made you stronger, if you've had to find peace in the middle of chaos, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments. I read everyone,